Folks, hello. Welcome to the show where we are going to be unveiling 6 fallacies and how you may be thinking about proprietary deal sourcing. So today there's going to be a few things that we want to do. One, we're going to discuss why we decided to launch a survey asking you about your current proprietary deal sourcing tactics. And the short answer, real quick, is that the market is changing fast. You probably know that best. And so some of your practices may require a tune-up. 2, we're going to share those exclusive survey results with you. And 3, we're going to turn to 2 deal experts from Exit Strategies and ask them which survey question results indicate that there might be some fallacies and how people are thinking about this topic and ways that you can apply it to your own deal sourcing strategy to maybe get a leg up on the competition. So that is our quick agenda, but before we get into those things, allow me to introduce myself and breeze through some quick housekeeping. I am Nick Donato, an industry strategist here at Navatar, which is a cloud software provider for the financial services industry, and that includes private equity firms, corporate development teams, and M&A advisors. For any questions that you may have, please send them our way using that GoToWebinar widget that should be on your screen there, and I'll make sure to field them at the end of our show. And because this comes up a lot, yes, a recording of today's presentation will be made available. Just check your inboxes in the coming day or two for that. Now, moving on to the next slide, you may be wondering what gives Navatar credibility on this topic. And the short answer is that we help deal makers act more efficiently and with greater insight. So we offer tools and workflows that give you a full view of your pipeline, help you track the status of deals, and just ensure that you're reaching out to the right intermediaries. Or to put it another way, top deal teams aren't relying on Excel spreadsheets and basic CRM to source and close the best opportunities anymore. They're using a sophisticated deal sourcing engine that is modeled and really that is just tailored to their needs. Navatar, by the way, has over 600 customers across 35 countries and growing. We are a Salesforce Gold ISV partner, and we integrate with Box, which means that we've taken the 2 most trusted names in cloud security, and what we've done is configured them for your business model. So that means that everything comes ready out of the box. So moving on to the next slide, our partners today is Exit Strategies, which is a mergers and acquisitions consulting firm that specializes in helping deal makers originate and close proprietary transactions. So they are considered experts in their field, and we owe them a big thanks for helping us identify which proprietary deal sourcing fallacies may still be lurking out there in the market. So moving on to the next slide, I'm going to ask Jordan Wagner, who co-founded that group, to speak more about his firm and how we can help you. And then we'll hear from Ed Harms, the group's head of sales, and then finally Ketan Concur, who is my group's chief operating officer, and really the brains behind many of the proprietary deal sourcing workflows and tools that top buyers out there are employing today. So Jordan, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, and I appreciate the intro. You know, our firm, Exit Strategies, like you said, is a buy-side M&A firm focused exclusively on proprietary deal flow. So in short, you know, a lot of either investment groups or strategic buyers look at deal flow that comes to them through sell-side processes where they can be reactive and see what companies are on the market. We are come into play when groups are trying to be proactive. So we try to go out and talk to business owners years before they may do a deal, understand specific industries that we target with our clients, and hopefully over time, you know, develop enough relationships that we get deals, you know, long before they get to a process, and many groups see them close and then call us or our client and ask why they never saw that one. And it's because we try to be proactive in that market. And I'll give Ed a chance to introduce himself and talk a little bit about today.
Thanks, Jordan. One of the things that was the genesis for us of really being excited about the Navatar survey effort was a blog we had written a couple months ago. It was entitled The Great Divide. In other words, alluding to the separation, the fundamental separation, the difference in worldview between the private equity buyer and the mid-market prospective seller. And we got tremendous feedback from that blog, and it really confirmed for us that there is a great divide. And the survey responses are both interesting and materially valuable, very useful. They do explain a lot, as we'll address as we move through the survey results. But both buyers and sellers reported after that blog to us their experiences in deals where the deal was meandering. It wasn't going as they thought it should. It certainly wasn't going as the facts indicated it should, as the data indicated. And they'd run into a negative factor or something, and it had an asymmetrical, disproportionately negative impact on the deal process itself. All of those things are indicative. They're symptomatic of the fact that there's not a bridging in that process of the great divide between the buyer and the seller mentality.
Absolutely. And as we go to the survey here, I think what we found revealing about the responses was some of it confirmed what we had thought and felt over our years in the business. Was really a lot of the difference was a difference of perspective and mindset going into the deal. How the owner is approaching it and how we or a group may be approaching it is sometimes just vastly different, and that gap kind of causes some conflict or just kills deals before they start. And Nick, we can go to the first question here, and we'll kind of.
Or sorry, Jordan. Just before we do, I want to give Kane a chance to introduce himself, and then we'll move on to the survey results.
Sure. This is Ketan Khankar. I oversee the product strategy here at Navatar, and look forward to today's discussion. Hopefully, at the end, we can kind of quickly talk a little bit or showcase some visuals around some of the topics that are covered today.
Yes, and Jordan, just before we do get into that survey, I want to talk a little bit about our methodology and why we decided to launch it. And I'm happy to report that we had over 125 plus buy-side teams across the globe take part in this research. So we had a cross-section of teams based worldwide that includes the Americas, EMA, and Asia Pacific. Something that's important to note is that a majority of our respondents most certainly came from that mid-market slice of where transactions are being made. And with respect to why we are talking about this topic today, well, it's no secret that deal competition has intensified rapidly in the past 5 or so years. We have this combination of bigger players moving downstream, and then you just have the case that there's more private equity teams and more corporate acquisition teams that are springing up. They're crowding the playing space. So there, too, it's no surprise then that proprietary deal sourcing, or a way to scoop up a deal before it's exposed to wider competition, is becoming a lot of teams' antidote to those two trends that I just touched on. So the question becomes, what's the best way to do this? How can a deal team bring a little bit more institutionalization? And what I mean by that is a way to repeat their success time and time again. If more focus for your group is going to be on proprietary deal sourcing, which I should mention too, historically has not been a big percentage of most deal teams' overall deal flow count, despite what may be said to LPs, it's just not. So all this and more is an essential question that we want to address, and so we're proud of what the survey was able to accomplish. And Jordan, I'm going to tee you into our first question.
Perfect, thank you. So the first question was, from first contact to close, a proprietary deal takes on average how long? And this was interesting to us. We were excited to get the results here because I think this is one that we all have different perspectives on. And the most common answer was 3 to 12 months. And we think that makes sense, and we understand the perspective there. From our perspective, it's longer than that. And part of the reason is it depends where you're counting from. We think a lot of the groups probably count from the time they're introduced to a prospective seller or from the time it's serious. And we had 18 to 21 months as the most common time frame. And the reason being is, most of the time for us, there's a long period of time from the first time we contact an owner, the first call, to, the time that the deal's ever serious. So there's a big gap. And then once it's serious, we obviously hope that window's much tighter and we're not spending a ton of time on those things. But it could be a year or 2 years ahead of time, and Ed could speak to some of those numbers.
Yeah, it's interesting that the survey result here correlates in an interesting way with our in-house data. For instance, at Exit, our average from first contact, from origination to closure, is on average 21 months, which really correlates almost exactly with the B answer there. On average, from the private equity's first introduction, from our private equity clients' first handshake, first introduction to close is 7 months. So interestingly enough, that correlates with A, if you discount the front end work that we've done in bringing that prospective seller to the table. And then also our average from LOI to closure is 3 months. So our in-house data correlates very interestingly with the survey response. What it suggests is a mentality where the private equity player is kind of defocusing or de-emphasizing that front-end activity, which can be a year or more of initial front-end work. And, it may seem like a harmless difference in perspective, but to the extent that a private equity discounts the year of data collection and preparation before that first meeting, to the extent that they discount that as insignificant, they really have to do that at their own risk. And we're going to talk about that a little later in addressing one of the other questions. The bottom line is this, that a private equity, if they're doing their own front-end initiation work, their own origination work, their own front-end analysis, they need to add about a year at least to that 3 to 12 month cycle.
Yep, I think that makes sense, and I think that leads to our next question, which kind of correlates in the sense, the question was, what is the single biggest advantage of pursuing proprietary deals? And the most common answers here, as you can see, were better valuations, sufficient time to meet with ownership, and then third was more favorable terms, but all pretty close to each other. And what we took from this was, especially with better valuations and more favorable terms leading over half the answers combined, was that it kind of speaks to a little bit of the perception that we don't think is exactly true. We think there's a perception out there that in proprietary deals, there's business owners who underestimate the worth of the business. But what we find is there's just as many business owners who overstate or overestimate the worth of their business. And what it really speaks to is in proprietary deals, you are more likely to get someone who doesn't know the market. But for us, obviously over time, we do hope that our clients are able to get more favorable terms and better valuations and a higher certainty of close. And we do think those things exist. But the only one that's certain is that they're able to get a period of time alone with the business owner, understand ownership, understand the dynamics between maybe the key management team or their customers, a lot more time and understanding and access than you normally can get in the process. And I think that does lead to the other three items, but we feel if you focus and you're kind of looking for proprietary deals because they're cheaper or because you may be able to get a higher certainty of close, you'll more likely be disappointed because, over a long period of time, those things come to play, but, right away it may not show.
Yes, clearly, proprietary deals have a number of distinct advantages, and obviously they have some distinct disadvantages. But in our view, when we bring an opportunity to a private equity client, invariably the unique value, the most distinct advantage is that opportunity isn't being seen by the market at large. So what that translates into for our private equity client is that they get a long, serious, relationship building first look at an opportunity that's already been carefully pre-qualified as a good fit based on their specifications. Obviously, that's an enormous advantage.
The next question is, what should GPs be most cautious about when pursuing proprietary deals? And this one was interesting to us, going along the same path as the last one. What is the concern, and then what are you, most excited about? And we found that on this one, the big item was wasted time and resources. And I think, that is a real concern, and we agree that probably is the biggest concern. that you should be mindful of. But there is a caveat there, and one that we see often. If you overly worry about the wasted time and resources, it will be hard to run a good deal origination engine, whether you hire internal employees or you hire an outsourced firm like ours. What we find is, some of our clients will hire a few employees to work on, deal flow and proprietary deals, and 6 months or a year and a half later decide it's not working. And what we find is it's very hard to monitor where your wasted costs are in this type of environment where you're going to call 100 companies and you're going to develop relationships with 10 or 20 of those, and your hope is one becomes a deal, but you won't know which one. So what we find is if you worry too much about the wasted time and resources, you may mess up a deal before it even gets started because you'll avoid good deals and bad deals. So what we find the best path is to understand that there will be some wasted time, understand the percentages, try to play in the right field. So go after the companies that you think are most likely to sell to you and more likely to be down the fairway, and try to play the odds, and you'll get enough over time. As you tighten that process, you'll be able to limit the wasted time and resources, and over time, close enough deals that you don't think about it.
You'll get more than your share. The work of a really smart, savvy front-end consultancy or a really tight internal process on the front end indemnifies you largely against this very understandable concern about wasted time and resources. As Jordan said, it's part of the business, but you can indemnify yourself against extraordinary waste, extraordinary expense in terms of lost time by how tight that front end process is. We at Exit, we like to think of a dual due diligence process. Obviously, our private equity, a client does an exhaustive due diligence before consummating and closing a deal. But there's also a lot of pre-introduction, a lot of preliminary due diligence that we do before we even bring the prospective deal to our client. So we find that our clients who really expect us to gather this intelligence, and then once we do, those who leverage it the most are the ones that have the least negative experience with inordinate wasted time and resources, and have the greatest success in terms of closure percentage and quality of deal in terms of the paradigm that they're looking for.
Absolutely. And before we go to the next question, looking at the other choices here, so poorly packaged information, miscommunication or late changes, and owners have a high valuation because you reached out to them, so they think there might be some perfect fit that heard my friend's company sold for this number, etc. What we find is all three of those are probably certainties that you'll run into, and they're just cost of doing proprietary deals. There's some misunderstandings. The information isn't as well put together, but that all comes along with a guy or a girl who was not actively looking to sell, did not hire a banker and go through that process. Most likely, you're going to have one of these come up.
That's absolutely true. And in business and in life, we all want our cake. We want to eat it too. We want all the unique and distinct advantages of a proprietary deal, but we want it to be packaged like a bank deal, and that's often unrealistic. So we just have to face the reality and the opportunities that the proprietary deal market presents to us.
Absolutely. The next question is, what is the best way to start a new relationship with a target company executive? And it's something that we, have thought a lot about. We've always looked at, is it better to go to trade shows and meet them before we send a letter or email, or should we go see them in person and wait, or just hit the phones and write a personalized email? What's the best way? And what we found is there really is no best way. Owners are different. They're entrepreneurs. We try to understand them and understand the industry and trends and approach each differently. So we try to come up with a strong narrative of why this client has previous experience and makes sense for this owner to give ourselves the best chance. But we don't try to get locked in to one way being better than the other, or any specific model. We find they're all different and try to do the best we can to understand each one, the trends of that industry, and give us the best shot.
No question about it. We find that, and everybody knows that targeting and engaging owners and C-level executives is really difficult. At Exit, we use the widest array, all the methods, sometimes in concert with one another. We're extremely effective at engaging a targeted owner or executive. But it's not just a question of engagement. That's really only half the challenge. The other part of the challenge is to do so. The other dimension is to do so on a favorable basis. So it's one thing to engage an owner or an executive, but to create a kind of a negative climate in doing so. It's another to do so and create a favorable basis for a forward-moving dialogue. That's the second dimension of engagement that's often ignored. So for us, we spend an enormous amount of time devising systems to work this engagement process. It's part art, it's part craft, there's a little science thrown in. It's all part of what we describe as the secret sauce of our business.
The next question, I think, is probably the one that we spent the most time on or thinking about or discussing internally. I think it shows a big portion of the divide we spoke about. And the question was, what is the best way to move a deal quickly and efficiently? And as you see, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with, as answer A was have a firm process and order. So NDA to data request to LOI, and try to follow that efficiently, kind of that rigid private equity process. Second would be, and the most popular answer was to meet the target, either management or ownership, as soon as possible. Obviously, C was to be flexible on what the owner prefers, and D was make sure not to make an offer until you are fairly certain you won't need to change deal terms. And what we found most interesting here was, for us, that being flexible on what the owner prefers is an obvious answer, and it wasn't in this case. But what we feel is that in these processes, the owner has a way that they're comfortable moving. Some, want you to come visit them, come shake their hand, and sit for dinner before you ever talk numbers. Others may have had a terrible previous experience where they spent a year with a group and it went nowhere, so they prefer to send you their numbers and make sure you're in the same valuation range. So I completely understand the mindset of meeting a target company as soon as possible. I think that's a good mindset. It de-emphasizes some of the rigid facts, and it does lead to a better feel. The owner feels like you get to know them, but each owner is different. They have different sensitivity points, and what we find is that many of our clients have rigid processes in terms of closing deals, analyzing opportunities, and trying to be successful. But when you bring that rigid process too early on and are a little bit stuck in your ways of how to move forward, you can kill a deal way before it ever starts. And we find there's no point of bringing up, roadblocks. Let's see where things go, get it to that stage where the owner's comfortable, and then we can worry about implementing the process. I think here, our best clients, and we have some really good ones who specialize in proprietary deals, and each time they take an intro call sounds different than the next, and they're very good at seeing kind of the context that we've given them. So if an owner's biggest item is he wants to move quickly, they phrase their narrative around that. If an owner is worried about it being an all-cash deal, they phrase it around that. And if he's worried about the future of the employees and doesn't care about the deal points, they'll go out and see him and make him comfortable. And we find that is the most effective way to get deals done in this environment of proprietary deals is try to, don't approach it with the same rigid process that you're going to approach the deal. The origination stage, you have to have some flexibility.
Yes, the word flexibility there for us in that C answer is very nuanced. It's really more than just flexibility. It's not just a question of knowing what the owner prefers, but where the owner's at. I mean, the idea is to learn who the owner is and where they're at psychologically in relation to their business, and bring a deal to the table, to get aligned with them very quickly. And the best clients we have get aligned immediately. They use a lot of what we provide them to create alignment, and they maintain that alignment. Many times, or not many times, I shouldn't say that, occasionally we'll give a very, very detailed, in-depth pre-introduction briefing to one of our private equity clients, only to find that they enter the meeting really unshaped and uninfluenced by it. They come in, they may assume that the seller is much further along than they are, or vice versa. It's what we call we have a name for it. We grimace a little bit when we say it. We call it the Autopilot Syndrome. They conduct that first meeting the same way every time, and invariably, when you do that, when you're not keyed into who they are and getting aligned with where they are, you become the client becomes invariably like a bull in a china shop, and quite frankly, we spend more than a little time sometimes picking up the breakage. So flexibility is a very multifaceted concept here. It's very highly nuanced. And in summary, I would say it's all about getting and maintaining that all-critical alignment with the seller.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, in some ways, I think it's looked at as not so important which order you go in. And I think in a lot of ways it's not. But if you lose the nuance and the focus on it, you'll end up making a silly mistake that is really no big deal to you or seems like nothing, but to an owner, just turned him off or had him go another direction, which could be easily avoided. The next question was, what mentality should you enter a meeting with a target company exec? And this was, I think along the same lines of the last question. The last question was how to move a deal quickly and efficiently. And really, this is a similar question in the sense of the order of events and what should you be prioritizing, and what mentality should you enter with. The most popular answer was to solicit key data points so you can make an early decision on where to spend time. And I think, again, this illustrates the divide again of mentality, where I think the intent of that answer is for private equity group to say, we don't want to waste an owner's time. If we can know early enough that we're not going to buy this company, or we're not going to be able to get to his price, then let's get enough data that we can tell him quickly so we don't waste his time. And I think that is fair and understandable. Where we had the answer was try to follow the owner's lead and let things flow naturally, for the reason of we find that owners sometimes head into these meetings with different perspectives. Sometimes they've read your letter and they think there's some perfect fit with a previous portfolio company that you've had. Other times they want to give you data points and want to see if it's a pass. Other times they may want to meet you in person, and you're going to have to eat that wasted time if it ends up that they have a high valuation. And while it'd be great to get the valuation or to get some key point before that meeting, sometimes if you try or if you push, the meeting won't happen, and it may have been a deal that went forward. So you have to think about it in the sense of, in a perfect world, we'd like to have all of this, but it's just not possible here. So the choice is, do we have the meeting knowing that it could be a waste of time and it also could be a great deal, or is it not worth it? And I think that's a point that is difficult for a lot of groups. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we have some groups that are very good at it, where they create an environment where they say, yeah, we'll come see you anytime, let's have a call first. And even just the act of saying they're going to visit, and that the casualness of their tone on the phone, most of the time they'll actually get the numbers and get those key points before they ever need to invest the time, just by showing that flexibility. And the owner feels that mentality that, okay, they're not just focused on a balance sheet, they're not just focused on my numbers. Because I think we all need to remember that business owners come into these conversations with a negative perception sometimes of the investment community, just look at spreadsheets, just gonna, look at the numbers, doesn't care about my employees or what we actually do. So we have a saying that it's a conversation, not an interrogation, and we really want it to feel like the owner feels like it's someone he gets along with, not just like he got pulled over and we're asking him questions.
This really what Jordan's referring to is underpinned by the whole great divide issue, the difference in worldview. Sometimes we remind a client that when they go into an initial introductory interview, this might be the 5th or 6th or 8th or 10th interview they've done, initial introductory interview they've done in a month. But the seller, the prospective seller, they may have built this business over 10, 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, this business is very much a part of them, and they haven't sat through 5, 8, 10, 15 of these introductions or these meetings. This may be a first for them, and you got to navigate that. It's got emotional and psychological complexities that you ignore at your own risk. So following the owner's flow or the owner's lead in this respect is not something passive. Quite frankly, it's quite the contrary. It's those who do it well. It's a masterful way of achieving great efficiency in managing a deal process.
Yeah, and piggybacking on that, Ed, I think maybe as we walk through kind of connecting these points from the 6 questions together, I think the first one that I think people should leave with, or in general, is proprietary deals have some really distinct advantages, but they can't be approached like a bank or auction deal, and that's why we need to remember that in most cases it's very different than a bank deal. So in that first comment, it's there's advantages and disadvantages of proprietary deals, and if you can accept the cost and some of the uncertainty, there's a lot to be gained. But if you treat it like a bank deal, it's going to be very frustrating.
Absolutely, that's a great takeaway. Another takeaway is that if you're using a consultancy as a front-end deal source, you need to recognize that they've probably worked on this deal they're showing you for a year or more before you get introduced. They've gathered a lot of data. They've got a lot of sensitivities and insights into the seller, the prospective seller, and you need to be open to that, and you need to leverage their experience, their insights on the seller in order to achieve optimal deal process efficiencies and the most profitable outcomes.
Well, Jordan, sorry, Jordan, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. We were leading to the close as well.
Oh, great. Well, let me thank both of you for walking us through those survey results. We hope that you found them illuminating. These were designed in a way to challenge our audience, and we hope that you were walking away with wanting to fine-tune or rethink your expectations, your mindset or mentality, as well as your approach or execution, and how you're going about your proprietary deal sourcing. This, all of course, is not the total sense or total way that you should be thinking about proprietary deal sourcing. What we want to provide you with this survey was a way to be thinking about your overall strategy. Once you get down in the weeds at the ground level, there are, of course, going to be different tactics from firm to firm. But what I would like to do is introduce the audience to Caden Concur again, because he has worked with some of the top private equity and corporate development teams about those very tactics. So what he's going to do is take this high-level strategy and ground it for us and give you a few examples of the types of workflows, types of data points, and types of tools that you want to be thinking about when you're executing your own proprietary deal sourcing strategy. So, Caden, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Thanks, Nick. And from my perspective, it was fascinating to hear about the survey results. And again, it's a combination in a sense of having a process in there, having data points, but at the same time being flexible in terms of how you approach things. And I'll just take a couple of minutes. Just wanted to highlight some things that we find our customers using a lot. So, for example, if you're using as an example of a data point, you you have the ability, if you're engaging with prospects directly, to, like in this case, to be able to see what they've done, if they've registered on your website, if they've looked at certain pages. What that allows you to do is develop a marketing score and prioritize kind of which companies are engaging with you as you're doing your own outreach directly out to them. Again, ways to use the data to prioritize kind of the prospects who may be more interested or who may be responding better to you. Again, metrics are important, so to be able to see kind of touch points and what's on your watch list, and kind of be able to see how many meaningful meetings you've had with any of these given companies. That's important. As part of the process, it's important to be able to have up-to-date notes and be prepared for every single meeting. Many of our customers, what they're doing is some prefer to use work in Excel. So you can have your list of prospective companies as you're kind of doing your own diligence and analysis about those. You can update information in here, add your notes directly into Excel, and update Navatar from there. Again, allows you to quickly be able to kind of be on top and make sure that you have all the latest information associated with all the companies that you're reaching out to. Um, and again, for any of the companies that you are in touch with, it's important to kind of get as much intelligence as you can, uh, to know, and sometimes it's to qualify, but also kind of for to have more meaningful meetings. So kind of when you look at any given company, the ability for you to have background details, if they've kind of even things like who their investors are, how much funding have they raised in the past, whether it's kind of whether it qualifies in terms of the kinds of things that you're looking for, what conferences they may be going to. All these are again additional data points that can help you execute on the strategy. Of course, kind of overall, this is one part of a large evaluation process. You may be working, kind of if you're working with intermediaries directly, for example, you can develop scorecards and ratings and see kind of if you're getting to see all the deals that these consultants or intermediaries are showing to you. They'll obviously then put it into your pipeline, so you can manage your entire pipeline as you do your evaluation, and then leading to due diligence and being able to track at a very detailed level kind of what's going on with evaluation of every single company that you're looking at. So again, just wanted to do a very brief visual in terms of kind of some how our customers are using and what we see in the market in terms of the strategies that they're using to execute on this. With that, Nick, I think we're heading back to questions now.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I just want to quickly reinforce one of the points being made, because in our survey, I think we were able to stump our audience on 5 of the 6 questions. There was one question that I think 64% of people answered in the best practice that we recommend, and that is, what is the best way to meet one of these target companies? What's the best way to initially source that proprietary deal? And our options were, you can go to a conference, you can do email blast and phone call blast, or you could try to catch them at a trade show. There was a few different options, but most people realize that there is no single best way. And we would echo that point. We would just add to it, when you are collecting all those data points, whether it's a phone call being made or you host some type of marketing event or you catch them on a roadshow, that you're capturing that information, and wherever that information is being stored, that it's all speaking towards each other. And I think maybe that's where the fallacy comes in for a lot of firms. They're not able to quickly tally, right, these are the people who I've had an ongoing relationship with, or I've had a positive touch point with, or a negative touch points, and they tend to lose that data over time. So I'm happy that we're able to show some of the ways that you would track that data in a way that you're not crunching too many numbers on Excel. So with that, I'm going to turn over to questions, and we have a few that are trickling in. Again, just use the go-to webinar widget that should be on your screen there to submit them. First question, Ed, Jordan, I think this one is more for you. And Paul is asking, what is your biggest challenge or frustration in dealing with your private equity clients during an exit?
Yeah, Ed, I'll take that one. I'd say one of the more challenging parts of our process is when dealing with private equities. I think the iBanking process creates a motive where groups have a mindset to look at everything. So be flexible, be open-minded, this may be a little big, or it might be a little small, or it might be not down the fairway, but let's take a look. And I think that mindset is very counterproductive on the buy side, where it's more important to focus in, to know exactly what you're looking for, and know if something's on the edge and probably not worth it, because the owner should talk to one person here. So you need to show interest. And if you go in with the "I'll take a look," and the owner goes in with the "Oh, I'll listen, I'm not that interested," well, then there's really no one push driving the interest, and it's not going to go very far. So I'd say the biggest frustration is the mindset of just looking at anything and taking calls just to learn more is really a negative on the buy side, where in a process, I think it's a benefit.
I totally agree with that, Jordan. What we see, we have a number of clients who may not even admit to it, but subliminally, subconsciously, they want to see everything. Because even though it might not even come close to the paradigm they've given us is what is the deal they're looking for, they're always conscious of the possibility there might be that needle in a haystack, that anomaly that's way outside their parameters, but they'd like to see and close. And frankly, that's just not we try to dissuade our clients from that as quickly as possible. It's just not a productive mentality to enter the proprietary deal sourcing market with.
Okay, we see a few more questions coming in. I'll take a couple more because we did want to keep this to about 45 minutes. Ed, Jordan, this is another one more for your direction. This is Tim asking, what do you think the greatest misconception sellers have of a private equity buyer in your view?
Yeah, Ed, I'll start on this one. I think sellers have a mindset that, especially if they've not had any experience with private equity, that their suits, they just look at numbers and spreadsheets. They come in, they fire my employees, cut costs, and focus on that end of it, rather than most of our private equity clients are actually looking for growth and looking to invest in growth, and a little bit different than what their mentality would be. So I would say that's the biggest misconception. Ed, do you have anything to add to that one?
No, I think that's it. I think the notion that they're not being approached by a partner, a potential partner, is very big. The private equity really has, for instance, a concern that many sellers have is that their employees and the stakeholders are going to be left out in the cold. And in the vast majority of cases, our private equity clients that's the furthest of their intents. They want to enfranchise because they're interested in long-term growth and value.
Another question coming in from Brandon. This one, all three of you feel free to jump at, but Kate, why don't we actually start with you? He's asking, besides Navatar, what other prospecting tools or software do you recommend to enhance your sourcing efforts?
That's a good question. So I think some of it depends on your strategy. You do need lists. You need to start with a list of target companies. So there could be some data tools that you may want to look at in terms of kind of research and be able to have an initial list. Depending on how sophisticated an outreach or a marketing strategy that you want to do, you can do that from within Navatar. You may want to you could look at tools like a HubSpot or a Marketo, for example, that gives you a lot of metrics. I think the key thing there across all the tools from our perspective is to make sure that you choose the right platform, so that as you think about all these different tools that could help you, all of them can plug in and interact and provide you one common place where you can manage the entire process. So the platform, from my perspective, becomes the most important decision in the sourcing effort.
Jordan, Ed, anything to add in terms of the tools or technology?
Yeah, obviously we use Navatar to help manage our leads and manage the pipeline, but I would say just as important is actually, of any tool you use, is actually implementing a process and using it. I think the first year we were on Navatar, we probably, got 10 or 20% of the efficiency we should have, and, updating your data, keeping your system updated, scheduling, leads, making sure things don't fall out of the pipeline, classifying your opportunities as A or B or C, and having some sort of system is really, just as, if not more important than what the system can do. Because I think without doing those things, as good as the system and as good as, all of the process it allows you to do, you just won't get the effect of it without also, it doesn't do it for you.
And that's actually a good segue for our final question that we have time to take. And this one may be more for you, Caden. Somebody had taken, this is Christina, had taken notice of a scorecard or ranking feature that was showed. If you could explain some of the methodology behind how one prospect is being listed A versus B or C.
Yeah. So the ranking feature kind of that was alluded to, it can be a combination of different factors. So one is, for example, how they're interacting to any outreach that you're doing in terms of kind of emails. Secondly, if you have a website and there's content on the website and you feel that a lot of your prospects do visit your website, you can actually build all of that in there too, and then assign different weightages based on different actions. So if someone who is clicking on an email can get, let's say, 1 point, versus someone who clicking on the email goes to your website, goes to 2 or 3 different pages, registers for an event, can get a score of 3 or 4, and that allows you to then collate this over time and develop a ranking across all the different prospects. You can also use even kind of simpler metrics like number of meaningful touch points that you've had, number of meaningful conversations that you've had, to also build in the ranking system there.
Well, folks, that is all the time that we have today. Let me say thanks again to our 2 special guests, Jordan Wagner and Ed Harms from Exit Strategies. You can see contact details for both of them on that final slide there, as well as for myself. So if you have any questions about the survey that we conducted, the methodology, or about some of the best practices that you heard here today, by all means, feel free to reach out. As a reminder, again, a recording of today's broadcast will be made available for everyone. In fact, we'll just shoot it straight to your inbox. Look for that in the coming days. And I should mention, too, that proprietary deal sourcing, of course, is just one aspect of your total deal sourcing efforts. Navatar has a lot to say about your intermediary deal sourcing as well. If you'd like to have a look at that, just check out our website at navatargroup.com and click over to the Thought Leadership section, and you can see a lot of interesting intelligence over there, too. So on behalf of Jordan, Ed, Caden, and myself, we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, everyone.